before they burned his books, before he was imprisoned for his ideas, before he spoke of energy and atmosphere. There was a young man, barely 23, walking the war-torn streets of Vienna, not as a soldier, but as a seeker of something deeper. In 1919, Wilhelm Reich joined the Vienna Psychoanalytic Association, Freud's inner circle. He was ambitious, sharp, and he was about to write something that would change psychoanalysis forever. This is how it began, the theory they couldn't ignore, the discovery that would challenge the father of modern psychology himself. In 1920, Europe was a wound still open. The Great War was over, but not forgotten. Men returned broken, societies fractured, bodies survived, but minds were unraveling, and Vienna had become the capital of the mind. Psychoanalysis was rising fast, a revolution of couches, dreams, and theory. Freud had turned suffering into structure, and the city had become his lab. But for Reich, something was missing. He didn't just want to interpret symbols. He wanted to understand the body behind the symptom, the tension behind the silence, the breath behind the breakdown. By 1922, Reich wasn't just a student in Freud's shadow. He was rising, fast, presenting clinical work that startled the analytic world. While Freud focused on unconscious drives, Reich paid attention to the structure of the patient, not just what they dreamed, but how they sat, how they breathed, where they tensed, and when they collapsed. He began to see something dangerous. What if character itself was a defense? What if entire personalities were built, not around truth, but around survival? He didn't say it out loud yet, not directly, but you could feel it coming. Reich wasn't just extending Freud's theory. He was about to expose its limits. In 1925, Reich published his first major work, Der triebhafte Charakter, the impulsive character. And with it, something shifted. This was no longer just theory. This was confrontation. Reich argued that neurosis didn't just express itself in isolated symptoms. It shaped the entire personality. The patient wasn't just sick. They were structured by sickness. Their character was a defensive system, built to repress emotion, to avoid pain, to survive childhood wounding. He introduced a new concept, emotional armor, invisible but real, held in the muscles, stored in the breath, written across the body. This wasn't metaphor, it was diagnosis, and it was dangerous. Freud took notice. He saw the brilliance, but also the risk. Because if Reich was right, then Freud's model was incomplete. Freud had built psychoanalysis on the theory of unconscious drives, that repression lived in the mind, that dreams and slips revealed the truth. But Reich was uncovering another truth, that repression lived in the body, that the unconscious wasn't just a psychic construct, it was biological, muscular, embodied. And if that was true, then psychoanalysis would have to change everything. So, did Reich prove Freud wrong? The answer is yes, pretty much. Freud believed the unconscious was a realm of repressed desires, accessible through dreams, slips, and talk. He built psychoanalysis around that premise. But Reich showed that repression isn't just mental, it's physical. It's in the body, in the muscles, in the breath, in the face we show to survive. He didn't just expand Freud's theory, he broke it open. And that changed everything. Because if trauma and repression lived in the body, then the couch wasn't enough. Words weren't enough. Healing would require something deeper, and that made Reich a threat, not just to theory, but to the very structure of psychoanalytic power. Today, those ideas are everywhere. In 1997, Peter Levine published Waking the Tiger. He said trauma isn't in the event, it's in the body's response, and healing begins by releasing that tension through movement, breath, and sensation. In 2014, Bessel van der Kolk released The Body Keeps the Score. He showed how trauma rewires the brain and embeds itself in the body's memory. That talk therapy alone isn't enough, that the body remembers what the mind forgets. They're celebrated now. But Reich was already saying this in 1925, nearly a century earlier. So ask yourself, if we knew this in 1925, why was it buried? Why did they silence him? What were they so afraid of? Because what Reich proposed didn't just challenge Freud, it threatened the entire framework of psychiatric authority. If character is armor, then pathology isn't just an illness, it's adaptation. If trauma is held in the body, then healing isn't just analysis, it's release. If society teaches us to repress emotion, then the root of suffering isn't individual, it's systemic. Reich wasn't just treating patients, he was exposing a culture of control. That's what made him dangerous. Not because he was wrong, but because he was too right, too soon. The publication of The Impulsive Character should have been his rise. And for a moment, it was. Freud called him brilliant. Prominent journals took notice. Students began to follow him. But whispers started. Criticism crept in. The establishment pulled back. Because Reich wasn't playing the game, he questioned the hierarchy. He brought therapy into the body, and he didn't hide behind theory. He made patients cry, shake, breathe, and sometimes scream. He was turning the couch into a battlefield, and for the Freudians, that was too far. This was the beginning of the end. In 1925, Wilhelm Reich published a paper that could have reshaped psychology forever. Instead, it became the first step in a long suppression, but it also planted a seed that would grow into character analysis, into somatic therapy, into trauma-informed work, decades before its time. And that seed, buried, ignored, burned, is still growing. Next episode, we follow Reich deeper into the body, into the breath, into the armor. Because the next chapter in this journey won't just challenge theory, it will challenge you. Subscribe to follow this truth, one layer at a time. Because Reich wasn't ahead of his time. We're just late.